Welcome to another episode and a recap of Shenmue The Animation, and in this video, like I mentioned in the title, it's really the gems and the things that I was able to notice on this episode of Shenmue The Animation and compare it to the games, kind of like the gems that I found. And as always, super spoiler alert, this is going to get spoiler heavy on the Shenmue series as well as the episode itself. So without further ado, let's get started. Oh, yes, one further ado. Consider subscribing if you want to see more of these. Now let's get started. So the episode started with what seemed to be a retelling of the previous episode where Ryo's dad was murdered. But the scenes were different. That's because Ryo was dreaming of the events, so these were his thoughts. This plays out slightly differently, but it's a retelling of the dream sequence Ryo has early on in the game. Next, we get the intro song and animation for Shenmue. Very much liked and appreciated. Moving on, we have Xinhua walking through Bailu Village, greeting characters that we recognize from Shenmue 3, like Su Shisheng and the fanboy of Shenhua's that we recognize as well. Now, apologies if I butchered the names, but moving on. These scenes never happen in the game, so they're interesting to see. It was also super intriguing to see Grandma Ye practicing and reciting the poem with Shenhua, especially when one of the kids points out, "Who's he?" talking about the man from the east. Now I had to mention this next part. In this scene where Ryo's trying to figure out what the letter from Yanduzu says, he's standing over a capsule toy of Tails, with the case just off to the side. Nice nod to the love of his capsule toys. Pretty cool. This next scene shows Ryo going to familiar places like the Ajiichi restaurant, asking Tao-san for help with the translation. Ryo then runs into Shenhua in front of the jacket shop where Charlie loved to hang out. However, they never reference that fact in the animation, which is okay, since the story's pacing has to move on quicker than the actual video game. Shenhua also offers to help Ryo find someone who can read the letter, again giving Shenhua more character than in the original games. I love this. Chai is then seen sitting in a warehouse, angry that he was defeated by Ryo. Since these scenes never happen in the game, this stuff is completely original for the series. We never get to see Chai in this form, as he is obsessed with impressing Lan Di. His motivations were never really clarified in the games, but it seems here that he's just a fan who desires to work for Lan Di by impressing him. Moving on, Ryo finds Yamagushisan in the park, where Yamagushisan asks Ryo if it's okay to visit once things have settled down so he can burn incense in Iwao's memory. This leads to an interesting arc for the episode, which never happened in the game, starting with Yamagushisan not approving of Ryo digging up information regarding Iwao's past. Next, I wanted to point out Ryo walking into Bar Yokosuka to speak with Tehuriko Saijo-san. These events are technically in the game when Ryo was looking for sailors, but the animation omits the hunt for sailors concept. In the game, Ryo explicitly asks where sailors like to hang out, but in the animation, he asks where the guys from the harbor like to hang out. I love the fact that the bar is faithfully recreated when compared to the game. Saijo-san tells Ryo in the game that either go to MJQ Jazz Bar or Heartbeats Bar, while in the animation, he just tells him to go to the Heartbeats Bar. Now, I've talked about this scene in a previous trailer comparison, so I'll move on from here, though I will mention that the Heartbeats Bar sign is on the floor as well, just like the games, not just overhead, which I mentioned in the previous trailer comparison. Now, it's impressive that the actual Heartbeats Bar is pretty faithfully recreated. One thing that starts off different is that instead of the bartender sliding a glass of milk over to Ryo, he's just immediately made fun of. Then, of course, instead of looking for sailors, Ryo's looking for info regarding local Chinese operation. Once again, just like in the game, Ryo's asking around. The animation, however, changed things up because it shows the tattoo artist just briefly before he picks up the phone to call Charlie. In the game, Ryo simply gets told to come the next day. When Ryo shows up the next day, he gets surprised and attacked by Charlie himself. The setup happened off-screen, while the animation showed Charlie getting a phone call from the tattoo parlor, then talking to his friends suspecting that the Chens are involved. Now here we have a major difference. In the animation, this kid is crying about having his soccer ball taken. Immediately, we see that Charlie found Rio, which is the other way around when compared to the games. At this point in the games, Rio has already found Charlie and gotten information. Charlie just picked on this little kid near a construction site and just wants to fight as revenge for what happened in the tattoo parlor. Also in the animation, after the scene plays out, we see Chai watching the events happen, which didn't occur in the games. Now this is amazing. We get a shot of Game U, the arcade from outside, and let's just say that it looks a lot bigger in this series. Here we have Rio showing the Chinese letter to Guangxi. Guangxi delivers food for the Ajiichi restaurant and is Chinese and always wants you to buy him a Jet Cola if you were in the States, or a Coca-Cola if you had the Japanese version of the game. But in the animation, he's apparently drinking a Ripsy Cola. Licensing can be funny sometimes. In this shot, we get a good look at Shenhua's flower shop. Here's where Shenhua brings up entrance exams for school. This conversation does happen in the games, but instead occurs outside of the tattoo parlor where he fought Charlie for the first time. In the game, Nozomi brings up Rio not being present for the college orientation. In the animation, she brings up that college entrance exams are around the corner, but she assumes that he's already been recruited by a university in Yokohama. She's excited because she's already looking at schools in the same area. In the game, I'll admit, Nozomi seems somewhat of a nag, telling Rio it's about time he studied for the entrance exams and she's worried about him, while Rio just brushes her off. The next scene in the animation shows a flashback with Iwao trying to teach Rio to study martial arts and not his sports magazine from 1980X. Rio then runs away, insisting that he'd read it later. In the next shot, we finally get a look into Shenhua's room, which we've never seen before. Now see this photo? In the game, it was in a drawer in Rio's room, but here we can see that she had the same photo, but framed. The photo has Nayuki, Ichiro, Rio, and Shenhua in it. This added a bit of depth in the long-standing friendship. She then gets summoned by her grandmother, who says her father's calling from Canada. Now we don't get to see her grandmother in this scene, but this is the first indication that she may not be going to study in Japan, and instead might be off to Canada. Now we cut back to Charlie in the Heartbeats bar talking about the Chens again. He's worried about losing a turf war with the Chens. All of this didn't happen in the game, so this is all new content, and it's just amazing to watch. Charlie comes up with a plot to fight Rio in order to one-up the Chens, since he thinks that Rio is working with them, which of course isn't the case. Next, here we have a shot of Yamaguchi-san at the Hazuki residence in the altar. After paying respect to Iwao, he asks about Rio, but was told he's away. This is interesting character development for Yamaguchi-san, showing what probably should have been his reaction in the games, knowing that Rio is on a revenge quest. He actually made a lot of sense, saying that adults in Rio's life should be pointing him in the right direction. Moving on, we finally start getting shots of inside U Arcade. First, we see Excite QTE 2 and QTE Title, two original games from Shenmue. I looked at the score of 87,063 points on QTE Title. I then laughed because I was reminded of the high score that I have in QTE Title, with mine being 1,067,347. Yeah, I'm flaunting that. Then it cuts to a game of Virtual Fighter, which I talked about in my previous trailer breakdown. We then have Rio meeting up with the two guys that he beat up outside of the Heartbeats bar. They walk in and try to apologize, then agree to take Rio to Charlie. This kind of happens in the games, but outside of the arcade, not inside. Rio knew not to trust them, but followed anyway. And then let me pull out this shot that happened right before the guys walked in. We can see the side of a pretty cool Space Harrier photo. I just wanted to point that out. Here we have Rio in the warehouse because he was obviously set up by the two guys. Now this fight kind of took place after the arcade in the game. The guys said they would take Rio to Charlie, but instead he gets set up in the parking lot by all the guys from the Heartbeats bar wanting their revenge. In the animation, it's actually Charlie's crew that jumps Rio, but he makes quick work of all of these guys effortlessly. While this is going on, Yamaguchi-san was actually watching, as Rio took care of the situation. Charlie finds out that Ryo had no idea who Chen was and just wanted information about his father, thanks to the letter. Yamagushisan hears this and is shocked. He sees how important it is to Ryo to find out more about his dad, since he believes in his father. Because he can't believe Iwao might have murdered somebody. Yamagushisan then has a change of heart. Charlie then tells Ryo that Landi is dangerous, and if he pursues Landi, he might get more trouble than what he bargained for. Then finally, we have the scene where Yamagushisan trains Ryo with the move Double Blow. Though this scene played out similarly in the games, it has so much more weight because of the events that occurred in this episode. It really added so much to this one moment that I have to give credit to the writers of the show. He also tells Ryo who can possibly read the Chinese letters, helping the plot move forward. In the games, it wasn't Yamagishi-san who told Ryo about Shiryu Shao, the teacher who can read kanji. Instead, it was Quan Chi in front of the soft drink machine. One additional thing to note is that in the game, the bench is up against the wall, with the slide being behind Ryo, but in the animation, the slide is behind Yamagishi-san. Finally, we close off with Shenhua and the poem again as she overlooks the landscape. Very reminiscent of the games. But then, what the? We see Master Chen and Guisang in what we think is a warehouse number 8 in the shadows. We know what's coming next. And then it's those end credits that we get for the first time in this format in the episode. So that's it. That's what I found in this episode with all the hidden Easter eggs and all the good stuff. But let me know what you guys think about what I found. And as always, you guys do a good job of pointing more things out or correcting me on things that I might not have known. So feel free to let me know with what you guys thought of the episode and additional details that you might have seen. Please subscribe for more. And as always, like, share, and you can make my day if you subscribe today. One more time, this is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys next time.